Astrological Association's YouTube channel. My name is Mary English. I'm a professional astrologer working in private practice in the UK. This is one of a series of short little videos explaining something about astrology in 10 minutes. Now today I thought I'd talk about the different types of chart shape. It's a guy called Marc Edmund Jones. This is his book here. It's called The Guide to Horoscope Interpretation, and what he was saying, and this is way back in the day now, so this is 1941, he was saying that before we even get into analysing a chart, ascendant, sun, moon or whatever, it's quite a good idea to look at the shape that the planets around the circle of the chart make, because that gives us a bit of an idea of how that person's going to be and the way that they operate and what's going to happen to them if they're stressed, etc., or not stressed. Now these are the 7 types, so I've got them on the screen here. We've got Seesaw, Bowl, Bucket, Splash, Bundle, Locomotive and Splay. And as you'll see, those little dots there, those represent the planets. Now when you're using this system, you don't take into account Chiron or the North Node. All you're taking is the 10 planets. So starting top left, we've got the seesaw, so you've got 5 planets against 5. It could easily, with the seesaw, be 2 to 8 or 4 to 6, but basically what you've got is planets evenly on either side of the circle. The interpretation for somebody with a seesaw chart is that they like to swing between 2 different parts of their life, depending on which houses there's 2 sides of the seesaw are in. So where is their energy for them? So say they've got something going from their 5th house, like in this example here, so we've got sort of 5th house to 11th house, or you could say 4th to 10th. So say it was 4th to 10th. 4th is the home and 10th is the work. You will have a number of empty houses, more likely, with this type of chart shape. But the person that has it will have an erratic energy, and they'll swing, and they'll like to suddenly go from one thing to another. Now, the other thing to keep in mind when you're looking at chart shapes, completely ignore houses. Don't take them into account. What you're looking at is the location of where the planets end up. Now, he does say in the introduction to the book that it doesn't really matter too much if you can't get your chart to fit into a certain shape. You might sort of be one shape and maybe another shape. So read the interpretations from both types, and then you'll be covering everything. Now, the website I'm using is AstroWiki, and this is the page astro.com/AstroWiki. I'm looking at it in English, so /EN/aspect underline pattern, and these are called aspect patterns. So let me just go back to the illustration there. Now, Bowl, if you were born between 1979 and about 1999, you might have a bowl or a bundle chart. You might find that the majority of your planets are all on one side of the circle, because the outer planets, Uranus and Neptune, got very close together, and in the 1990s they became conjunct. So you could find that if you were born during those years, that you will either have a bowl or a bundle. And it's pretty obvious what a bowl and a bundle is. So a bowl is everything on one side of the circle. So if you imagine a bowl like this, it can be any positioned in any way. That's the shape, the chart shape that a bowl is. A bundle is slightly smaller, so it's sort of like less than exactly half of the chart. And the planets are, and they can be in any position. So they could be at the bottom, they could be at the side. I can't do it with my hands. They could be at the top. So the people that have bowl or bundle charts, so bowl people have everything on one side of the circle. They're quite okay with the areas where their planets are located in that bowl. They've got quite a lot of focus in it. When it comes to the other side of the chart, because they have nothing in opposition, they're going to find it a lot more tricky to be able to judge something from a different viewpoint. Remember, if you yourself have a bowl chart, you need to get reflected back to you some information from somewhere else or someone else, because you yourself, everything is all focused into one area, loads of expertise in those areas and those houses, but when it comes to the empty part of your chart, you're not going to feel quite so au fait or comfortable with those things. So it's good to have someone mirror it back to you, because what can happen, especially if you have a bundled chart, which is even more clustered, is that you might go down a sort of a rabbit hole or something and find it more difficult to bring yourself back out of that again. So bowl and bundle chart shape people are more focused and can focus on that one area where their interests are, where the houses are. So you can use houses, I mean, it depends what house system you use, but whichever one that is, the focus of the energies will be in those houses. Obviously, the sun will have the major focus and the moon will be the secondary focus. And so you're really good in those areas, but in the other areas where you've got the empty things, don't fret about the empty houses. You can always do rulerships to it so you can get an understanding of those empty houses. But because your planets are focused all into one area, great in that area, a little bit more wobbly in the other. Now, a bucket is similar to a bowl. You've got all the planets on one side, and again it could be up, down, left, right, wherever, but there's one planet that's in opposition to the bowl. So if you imagine what a bucket is like, so you've got the bowl of the bucket, and then you've got the handle. Don't ask me how he came up with these ideas for these chart shapes. Obviously he was a very imaginative person, but there's one planet that is in opposition to the bowl, and that planet is called a singleton planet. J.K. Rowling has that. A singleton planet is where there'll be specific focus, but because he's a little planet and he's all on his own, he might find he's a little bit solitary in that. So say for instance you had your moon as your singleton planet, you might not know too much about how do I feel, because your moon is how you feel, and then every other experience you've got is on the other side of the chart. So you could find moon, singleton, planet, person more difficult to actually get a sense of how you feel, and again there might need to be some mirroring back from other people. Now, splash and splay charts are particularly very similar. The difference is a splash chart, everything's all the way around the circle and reasonably, regularly. So there's something in a house and not much of a gap between there's something else. So there's something all the way, like literally if you chuck some paint on a wall, so it's splash. So everything is all around the circle. So these are people that like to have lots of plates spinning, like to do lots of different things. It's similar to, but not the same as a splay. So a splay has a little cluster here, a little cluster there, a little cluster somewhere else, but predominantly the planets are all the way around the circle. So splash and splay people, depending on where those planets squished together, they're more likely to have focus in those areas. And again, because there's more than one location, especially with the splash, they'll do a little bit in this, a little bit of that, a little bit somewhere else. So these are people that are good in groups, great for groups because they can put their little attention into one or two areas and then move on to something else. Not so good at focusing zoom down. That's your bundle people or your cluster people where all the planets are closer together. They'll feel better by having more than one thing going on for them. And lastly, we have the locomotive. It's the most difficult to understand. If you imagine, because it was written back in the day, a train, an old-fashioned steam train, they've got brackets that hold the wheels on. They go ka-chung, like this to keep the wheels being able to move. So what that looks like is that you've got some planets in one place and some in the other, but they're not directly opposition like a seesaw. They're not all the way around the circle like a splay. They're in position, but there's a gap in between. So to represent, if you imagine those bits of metal that are holding the wheels together. Locomotive chart shaped people have a very erratic energy in their chart, don't particularly like being told what to do, will do their own thing, but because it's an uneven energy in the chart, there'll be a sudden lurch to something else, as opposed to a seesaw chart shaped person that likes to swing from one thing to the other, boom boom boom. A locomotive person is an uneven energy, so they're doing this thing and then all of a sudden and then they'll be doing something else. So it depends what people how they get triggered and stuff, but a locomotive is an uneven energy in the chart that sort of chugs along, but when something goes, everything all has to go again with it. So if you just imagine old-fashioned now train wheels on locomotives and how that goes vroom, vroom, vroom. So the energy in the chart is uneven. It's not an even thing. It will move together, but it's not a particularly fast energy. Obviously, it depends whether or not you've got a lot of earth or air or fire or whatever elements you've got. But it's an uneven energy in the charts. It's only summary that I can give. And so the person will have to feel comfortable, have to have more than one thing going on, but in where their clusters are in their chart, that's where their focus is. But where there's emptiness, where there's those empty bits, they need to explore those empty houses, look at rulerships and stuff, and how can I fill those empty parts of my life. So just a little introduction to chart-shaped patterns. Just going back to the book, The Guide to Horoscope Interpretation by Marc Edmund Jones. You might be able to get a second-hand copy knocking about somewhere. I'm from the Astrological Association. I hope this has been helpful.